So nature, like, is living. What dwells in nature, like the animals, they live with nature and they have to eat certain substances that come from nature in the trees and everything, and they live in the trees. And then if the forest, goes away, the whole ecosystem changes, and then they have no food. So they rely on the forest, and the forest is actually with life. You know what I mean? So it's living. So when you're around the energies of the forest and everything, you're surrounded by life, and it gives you life. And I tend to not be as bored when I'm looking at green leaves and the beauty of nature and stuff like this. It helps me with cope with the bored side of my life. You know what I mean? Where when I look at things and I just stop and be in nature and uh, alchemize everything and do the right thing, you know what I mean? Like having the right mindset, positive mindset, you know what I mean? And having a good day and starting off the day right and doing things, my routine, and looking at nature in certain ways, which it sparks my interest of creativity, of the mind, and doing many things that might spark an idea or a way of looking at things, or some sort of like pattern in that sort of sequence of plant. And there's so many plants and different things like this that have so many different ways they grow, and it's just so like magical. Like life is magical in a way because, say, a variety of different plants or tree species or bushes or anything like that, you know what I mean? There's such a variety of life that is around us and that we can see and observe. And that doesn't get boring because there's so much of it and it's all around us. So, what I'm trying to say is that life gives us life to experience more of life than what it would be without it. Because if everything was materialistic and never having living life with you, and everything was like there was no forest or anything, it wouldn't be as unique and creative as, because nature creates itself and grows, and it forms its own like perspective on how beautiful the way that nature entwines itself with itself, like the background right here of nature. You know what I mean? It entwines itself with itself, and it's like a cathedral. A cathedral is a church, and that is designed to look beautiful, and so is nature. But nature, wherever you go, it changes. Like so many different species will grow there, and certain things would end up being there permanently as a bigger sort of bush or something that grew over the other bushes. So then that forms itself in nature, the form of life as it's springing up. Then the perspective of looking at what nature created. It's looking at what nature created. So, you know, it's like that cathedral that was built by man, that was articulated to look a certain way. Now, natural nature articulates it to look however nature grows and however it develops. So it has that sort of characteristic of that certain things will take place in nature, which if you see that bush rather than the other bush, is because that one took over that spot in nature. In the wildness of nature between, uh, what's it called? Like the the survival of the fittest. In nature, it's the survival of the fittest, and it creates all these different species within the survival of it, that is the nature taking up the whole ordeal of it all. And that's the best way to describe the natural beauty of nature, is that it has a mixture of everything that thrived within the space that is living there now. And then that's the outlook upon the nature that's there for us to observe the beauty of it, just like the cathedral. But remember, the nature that created it is all natural selection, and based off of that, it creates beauty. You know what I mean? Off of just naturally being in nature and seeing the natural nature of the woods untouched by man, you'd see many different species and different things going on in the woods as the ecosystem. And that's what creates an ecosystem too. So this is all in accordance to everything that makes up the whole standpoint of life. Because we're in that ecosystem of life. We need the oxygen to survive just like any other animal. We're in accordance with this nature that's around us, that, you know, once we do this for the greater good, to realize the oneness is real and stand up for what we stand up for on the planet, so that no wars can happen in the Hobbit Home Society. I had 2 pages in the Words of Ways about the Hobbit Home Society, that it could change the world, you know what I mean? But anyway, it's almost getting to 7 minutes, so Neil, or me, Cody, loves, worships, honors, obeys the Divine Princess forever. Amen. And I love you, Divine Princess. I have to verify that afterwards. And the Divine Princesses, I hope you're doing amazing. Divine Goddesses, I hope you're doing amazing out there. Like, this is what I'm trying to say, is that, like, this is what I worship, because guess what? God. What is God worship? Well, obviously, the goddess, you know, the goddess. And the goddess worships the god. And this is how we see it in nature. Upon when a duck, 2 ducks are together, male and female, they stick together for life. So that's their bond. That's their, like, worship. In a way, we should worship the goddess, and then the Divine Goddess should worship the god. And that's how it should be, in the divineness of the oneness in nature and all that there is. But we can listen to each other's knowledge. Of course, knowledge is real, truth is real. So everybody can tell the truth and has the capability of it. So that's no big deal to follow some truths, you know, and do this and that and see how great people are and respect that. But we should be honoring, like, the Divine Goddess and the Divine Princess are pretty much the same thing. So what I'm trying to say is that the offspring of the first female, Eve and Lilith, the offspring of that, was coming from the brunettes and the blonde side of it, all throughout the generations of their offspring. And that's their female attribute that carried with that attribute of things. And what I'm trying to say is that this is all in accordance to the bigger sort of puzzle that we can, like, orchestrate our lives to. Like, Eve, like the first female, that's the Divine Princess or the Divine Goddess, in my eyes, originating source of which the fleshly, earthly humans came from. And without her, we wouldn't have the offspring. And without man, we wouldn't have the seed to give to her. So it all is the oneness, is what I'm talking about, is which makes this possible for our lives to exist in the physical and in the ethereal and everything like this, because it had to be created from somewhere. And the cycle of life continues, and the truth still needs to be unfolded, because of the fact that when we, the truth of life, you know what I mean, needs to be unfolded. Because we all know that there's a cycle to life, and that's real. And we follow that cycle, and it leads us to the oneness and the characteristics of like all life. And then this is what I'm trying to say, is that it puts the divine puzzle pieces together, and it makes sense then once you look at it, like the way I explained it. So anyway, have a good day, divine princesses. I love you.